Conversations with Shem. Our focus is to show how to put the human back into healthcare. You're about to watch an episode in the 6-week series where I interview doctors about the health crisis in America today.
Okay, so hello everybody who is joining us on this last episode of our Conversations with Shem. We are excited to be joining Samuel Shem once again for another round of panel discussion about putting the human back into medicine. And we're even more excited to be welcoming a brand new panel of physicians that Shem will be discussing this topic with. So as many of you know, whether you're watching this live or you're going to be watching it later, you can find all of our episodes on somidocs.com in the series section. And you could go back actually to all the episodes this season where we've welcomed some really great physicians and have had some great discussions. All right, so today we're going to soon be welcoming 3 new doctors in conversation, Drs. Hala Sabry, Bryan, and Drummond. So that's going to be really exciting. The viewers who are watching can interact with us during the live show and tell us how you think that we can put the human back into medicine. We're going to be splitting it into 4 as we do each week. The first section is going to have Shem discussing and giving us a bit of a commentary. We're then going to introduce the panel one by one. We're going to have a Q&A session and then a reading from Shem's new book called Man's Fourth Best Hospital. So without further ado, I am going to be welcoming Shem for the Shem Speaks session.
Thank you, Donna. It's so wonderful to be here on the 6th of 6 shows where we all try to discuss putting the human back into medicine. And what is inhumane about medicine now? Well, I don't have to explain it to you if you're in it. Simply put, what I've learned is that it's come along because of money and screens, which is money and money, since the screens are billing machines mainly. And the result is really sad. I tell you, we are in difficulty. Doctors, nurses, other people who work in healthcare, everyone is not doing very well. And there's a term called burnout or moral injury, or what I just call abuse of us healthcare givers. I really do think that we have to try to do something about it, because it's hindering the way we not only deliver care to patients, but it hinders us. And so I am so glad to do this, to get this chance to talk to people who are in the thick of it. I'm not in the thick of it anymore, but I write about it. I got back into the thick of it about 5 years ago in terms of seeing what was going on in medicine when I got a call to go to NYU Medical School. And to my surprise, since Harvard hated the House of God and me, They wanted me to come to be a professor of medicine and teach the house of God. I mean, I felt like I'd died and gone to heaven. Maybe I have, I don't know. And that has really gotten me to see very clearly what's going on in medicine now. My eyes were absolutely fresh. First day on the wards, I saw the miracles that we could do now in medicine. But then I also saw, as I said, two things on the wards: money and screens, which is money and money. And it's really, really something that needs our attention. And that's why, for the first time ever, I've never done this before, and I'm kind of raw at it. I had to do this, these 6 sessions. I am an optimist, though. I look at how we can emphasize how we can, if we get together, change things for the better, especially for Biden and the new administration that's coming in, who has terrific doctors, terrific people who are dedicated to really trying to do something about covering who needs covering, who, as we've seen in the COVID, don't have it now. So I'm very optimistic, actually, and that's why I say now we can. And I'd love your ideas on the panel and people who are listening. Well, what do you think? The way I have framed this for decades now is that the inhumanity comes with the danger of isolation and the healing power of good connection. What's good connection? Good connection is mutual connection. So the one big thing that I sound like a broken record about is stick together. Stick together. What happened to us in the house of God, the reason it was so horrible with, a suicide and people going crazy, is because the power came down on us from this big institution, and we got isolated. Not only did we get isolated from each other, we got isolated from our authentic experience of the system itself, meaning, we thought we were crazy for thinking it was crazy. And then finally, we got separated from our loved ones because the call schedule was so bad. And the house of God had a lot to do with making sure the call schedule got changed. The real thing that I'm saying, and I'll talk a little bit about it later perhaps, is we have to shift to the we. Here's a little example of what I'm talking about. Suppose you're on call and it's the morning and you have a terrible thing you have to do in the afternoon, a real problem that you don't want any part of. But you've arranged a lunch with a good friend you haven't seen for quite a while. So you go to lunch, and this is hanging over you. And if it's a good connection comes first. If it's a good connection, 5 good things happen at that lunch. Number 1, you leave with a feeling of more energy or zest. Number 2, more understanding of each other. Number 3, valuing each other. Number 4, you leave with more power to do what you're going to do. And number 5, you want to have another lunch. Now, the interesting thing about this is when you entered the lunch, you didn't really think you could do what you had to do afterwards. But the power arose from the connecting, for being connected. And you feel much better about doing that. So that, simply put, I would say good connection is good medicine. Good connection is good medicine. We have to put it at the center, not put ourselves at the center. Put a good connection at the center. I worked this out with my wife, Janet Surrey, years and years ago. She had the male theory of psychological health and growth, of course, is in the self, this thing. That's what we're taught as men. For women, the health and growth of psychology in women is in the quality of their relationships, the quality of their relationships. And so in our work together with thousands of men and women doing gender dialogues, it became very clear to me that this is available to men just as much as it's available to women. And we can learn from women, as we did in dialogues, and that it's much healthier when we stay in connection, and it's much more dangerous when you're by yourself, as you know. So that's it for now, and let's go. I see Dana there.
Wonderful. Yes, it's we usually time this to be about 10 minutes, so it's about that time. So Shem, thank you so much for that commentary, and that will be a great transition for introducing the panel. So let's get that rolling. All right, so without further ado, I'm going to be introducing our panelists for this episode one by one. First and foremost, we are going to introduce Dr. Hala Sabry, who is a board-certified emergency medicine physician and the founder of PMG, which stands for the Physician Moms Group on Facebook. So here she is. Welcome, Hala.
Hi. Nice to be here. That's crazy how you just like pop me in. I love StreamYard. I just haven't done it that much. I love that you're experimenting with it.
Exactly. Experimenting is my middle name.
I love
it. And Hala is fabulous. She's great with social media and she leads a very large group. So we are all very excited to hear what Hala has to say about putting the human back into medicine. So Hala's here. Next, we are going to bring on the panel with us Dr. Bryan, who is a non-invasive cardiologist in the Montefiore Health Network. So here he is, Dr. Bryan. Hi, Dwayne. Welcome.
Hi, Donna. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I'm excited to hear what you say as well.
Sure.
Let's also introduce Dr. Drummond, who is a Mayo-trained family practice physician, burnout survivor, and executive coach and founder of the happymd.com. Dyke, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good afternoon.
Absolutely. All right. I'm going to actually duck out and let Shem take over. You guys discuss. I'll be back for the Q&A panel. So break a leg, everyone. Here.
Oh my God, a survivor from burnout.
Yeah, we all are, I'm sure.
Talk.
Well, when I meet people like you and I meet doctors who are long in the tooth like me, I always start with, tell me your burnout story. And I know I've got a live wire when they say which one, because we've all got them, right? That point in time when you were trying to color inside the lines and be a good team player and it just got so uncomfortable, you said, I can't take this anymore, and had to either pivot where you were, or you had to change your job. And I believe that that's burnout's highest and best use, is to push you, painfully push you in the direction of more purpose.
Yes.
And most of the time you'll look back and say, man, that's when everything changed. I'm so glad I got so uncomfortable.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's only, to phrase it slightly differently, with patients or as doctors, the way we change is not just by walking through our suffering. It's walking through our suffering with somebody, right? And that's our job. That's in some ways, as we all know, all of you, I'm sure, when you have that click with a patient and you realize, hey, we're on the same page and I can help. That's what does it. And once again, it's a shift to the we. Is that right? Other people think? And I want to hear more, of course, from you.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I sort of view burnout as kind of a push-pull based on the demands that we face in medicine, along with the rewards that we get. Because medicine has always been a very demanding profession. I've been, just as busy and stressed out now as I was, when I was an intern and resident. I think the difference is that the rewards that we get are not what they were before, and that scale sort of gets shifted. And when I say rewards, I'm not talking about financial rewards, but sort of the other non-financial things like the gratification, the thank yous, the simple things, the respect in society that we sort of, took for granted as physicians years ago, that really isn't there anymore. And I think when you combine that with the other things that we do, the unwanted things that we do get, like the patient, I call them dissatisfaction surveys, the Yelp reviews, the other things that sort of add to the negative side of that push-pull, I think that's when burnout really reaches like a critical threshold where people, end up in a bad situation. So I think medicine's always been a very stressful job, just based on the nature of what we deal with in the life and death decisions. But I feel like the rewards, the non-financial rewards on the other side, really have gone in the other direction.
Yeah, I agree. I think burnout is such a loaded term. And I'm going to say that I've never been burnt out from medicine. So I don't know if this is the right panel for me, but I'm going to be really honest. I actually got burned out from running a Facebook group, which is very interesting because the demands of the members sometimes mimic some of the same kind of demands that patients sometimes have of us. So it's interesting that medicine didn't really offer that to me, but doing something to connect healthcare workers is what kind of did it for me and pushed me over the edge. But I will tell you that I think that the reason why I think burnout is a loaded term is that there is the aspect of the demands of patients, the demands of the hospital system, the lack of rewards, like you were saying, that does play into it. But then there's this other aspect of that. I think some people, especially ones that I'm coaching, it's not so much burnout as it's more of like you've kind of lost your purpose. And I think that medicine is very unique because for about 10 to 12 years, they have you in a vacuum where you are not supposed to think outside of that. And in fact, like you're just so busy, you really don't have the capacity to do so. So you're like, I just need to get through this, board exam, or I just need to get through this school or this residency or whatever. And then you get to the end and you forgot to kind of figure out the other parts of your identity. And so I think that kind of catches up with people, especially if they're not satisfied with work because of all the reasons that you guys mentioned, hospital systems, patients, whatever it may be. But then they don't have that purpose to even figure out like, where are they assessing their rewards are? Like, what are their rewards? And sometimes we don't even know because we've lost our purpose. And so one of the things that I, started doing is paying attention more to women, not only in medicine, but in male-dominated fields, because I think that this is not unique just to medicine. I just think we see it a lot more in medicine.
When you get stressed in different ways that you all discussed, what do you do? Especially you've written about it. I just wonder, how do you get through it? How do you walk through it so that you're not hurt more, you're not wounded more, but that you actually learn something about it? Dyke, do you want to take that one to start?
Well, fundamentally, there's two basic prime directives that we all operate by. There's the verbal one, patient comes first, and nobody ever shows you the off switch on that in your residency program. And I would argue that residency and medical school are a simple survival contest. And I do a lot of coaching, and I've trained thousands of doctors inside organizations. And I'll tell you that it's really hard to teach a resident how to prevent burnout in practice because they're not in practice. They have been given a different assignment. It's a bounded task, which is nice. I mean, we know where the finish line is, but the goal is to survive to the finish. Because what do they call the last person graduating in your medical school class, right? Doctor, just like the first. So when you get out, though, once you've been indoctrinated, patient comes first, and then the unspoken one is never show weakness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Once you are sprung at the door of your board certification, you now have an unbounded task. And what you have stretching to the horizon is a life to reassume. In the addiction literature, they say when you start using, your emotional maturity stops. And when you recover from using, you're still the 18-year-old who started, and you've got all that time to catch up. I think it's about the same thing for somebody who walks into med school. Our emotional maturity, our relationships, our hobbies are all abandoned and again, I was in a non-work hour restricted residency program. It's a little bit different now, but residents and practicing physicians and burnout are different topics.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's sort of interesting because, thinking back, the happiest I've ever been in medicine was probably my first 2 years out. And it also happened to be when I made the least money. I actually did primary care for 2 years before cardiology, and I worked in a underserved area for the National Health Service Corps. And I took care of primarily underserved, drug addicted, some HIV patients. And really it was exhilarating because these were people who appreciated every single thing that I did for them. Again, I made very little money. I had an office staff of one person, one nurse, and a front desk person. And on the one hand, it should have been a very stressful situation based on the nature of the patients that I took care of and the lack of support staff. But the other side of it, the appreciation and sort of that sense of making a real difference actually more than accounted for the other aspect of it. And so I think any sense of burnout that might have crept up in that situation, the next day I went to work and felt like I made a difference in someone's life, really made a difference. And what I found is, as I progressed in my career and, perceived to have attained more status, more income, that satisfaction has gone in the other direction. And in training, you're always thought that if you just follow the rainbow at the end of training, at the end of the path that you set out comes happiness, but there's so many bumps along the way. And the real thing that really has given me satisfaction is really taking care of people and having a connection with patients in a way that I don't think we have as much of now as, certainly I did when I first came out of training.
That's wonderful. It's really wonderful that you had that experience. I'm sure it was hard work, and I'm sure it touched your heart. But it sounds like you were really valued. You were really valued, like that little thing, and empowered. All the things I said, those 5 good things. And it sounds like it's because even though you were not equal to these people in many different ways you would say it, you're empathic to them. You understand each other. And there's nothing like that when you get that kind of gratitude from helping someone. That's why we did it. That's why we're here, basically. I mean, money, sure, you can make a lot of money if you want, but I think the real thing is gratitude in that connection at the worst times of people's lives. That's the other thing. We're there. We, at best, walk them through their suffering, right? Rather than being alone with it. And on one hand is real health and growth, and the other is disease and death, right? We know this together. It made me think of something that's in the new novel, Man's Fourth Best Hospital, I heard someplace that one of the women in the Fat Man Clinic in Man's Fourth Best Hospital, which is what it's about, she's talking to the fat man, and she says, I spent a lot of time working with lepers, and the fat man says, I couldn't do that for $1 million. And she said, neither could I, So that's the good part of medicine. So what keeps us from that now in this system? I don't know. I mean, I don't know. Any of you can take that. What keeps us from that satisfaction, from that sense, the deeper sense of why the hell we went into it?
I would ask Dr. Bryan, when was this initial practice of yours? How long ago was it?
That was approximately probably about 16 years ago.
I'm going to point out it was before electronic medical records, so he didn't have that distracting him from the patient's gratitude. And you're open to spiritual influx here. You're willing to connect with meaning with your patient, and some people have had that beat out of them along the way, or don't have the opportunity, and the EMR wasn't in the way to distract you at the time. So I would think those probably played a role.
Yeah, absolutely. As I said, the screens, and what, 60 to 80% in front of them, that's what the Man's Fourth Best Hospital is all about. I had to write about it. Hala, do you want to say something about this?
Yeah, I think, it's interesting because, it's easy to bring up barriers to the human connection. It's easy to talk about, the screens, the EMR, there's lots of different, aspects of what can stop that connection. But I think something that Dr. Bryan said was really valuable. It's and I didn't write it down, so I'm totally paraphrasing, but it's more of like kind of seeing the value in that connection. But I think even deeper, like if we don't value ourselves first, like it's really hard to find yourself valuable to that person when you're looking at, you know, the way that you're rating your value is that, you know, dissatisfaction survey or the email from your boss or your productivity bonus or whatever it may be, you know. And I think, you know, going back to, I think a lot of things need to change in medicine. I think that it's not sustainable. And it doesn't matter how many medical students you graduate, and they're already set up for failure. I mean, look at the number of medical students that graduate and the number of residency spots, and the percentage of physicians that don't even get to practice medicine. So like we're in the survival mode for so long that it's so hard to, at the end, when you're ready to look at your own value and you're ready to see the value in other people, that it's really a disconnect to kind of be like, okay, I'm not in survival mode anymore. And what Dr. Bryan was saying is like, you know, you see that rainbow at the end, but that rainbow keeps moving far away because even when you get to that destination, it's not good enough for you. So you're like, okay, well, I graduated and I have this clinic or whatever it may be, and I have a house and my 2.5 kids or whatever that it is that you've decided that you want to have. And then you're like, well, no, that's not good enough. And then you start moving it, you know, further away. And I think that it's kind of a two-pronged thing. I think the system needs to change. And I don't think that I don't know what it's going to take. I don't know how many physician suicides it's going to take. I don't know if it's a money thing that, you know, the system has to lose enough money for them to make some decisions. But on the second prong, I think physicians, the reason why, one of my theories is that the reason why we don't fight back in a group way, in a concerted way, is I don't know if each one of us even knows our value anymore. And we don't know where to find that, you know? So I think you have these individuals that are consistently in this, like, you know, survival mode system, trying to fight back this system that's taking advantage of us. But it's a lose-lose situation because the army is not that strong, you know? So I don't know. I don't know exactly where to start it, but I think these conversations are a good start, you know, for everybody to start thinking about their own value, and not even in dollar signs. Like, not I bring, you know, X amount of dollars to this institution every year, but like I'm a real person that went into medicine for this reason. And that's still my GPS for my medical career, you know, and this still defines me. So yeah, I just think it's really complex.
You know, I think it's awesome to have these conversations. I think that the part of it that I struggle with is trying to see, how do we actually get change? Like, how do we actually move the needle? And, you know, unless these business entities that control medicine somehow had some metric that said that, you know, a content physician that's not burnt out actually improves their bottom line, there really is no incentive for them to change it. You know, patients can be advocates for physicians, but honestly, you know, doctors are not necessarily a sympathetic group to patients for them to be a voice for us to change in the medical system. And from a governmental standpoint, you know, government's never really shown basically a willingness, if you look at tort reform or lack of, to really help physicians. So where is that change actually going to come from? That's the part that I struggle with.
Well, I think I have some ideas because I work with the Beast. So I've worked with 175 organizations to date, attempting to help leadership teams install wellness strategies. And one of the things that you probably won't get is physician unions, because physicians are bred and trained to be lone rangers. So the original use of the term herding cats was used to talk about leading a group of physicians. And if you think about it, physicians won't give another physician their proxy. And that's what you have to be a union. I have to give you my proxy, and you as my shop steward have to go and negotiate. And then we have to also be in solidarity with each other. But we're in the United States. You probably have an international audience here, but every nation is a little bit different. But single payer and lower wages and all that kind of stuff makes a big difference in other places. I have folks in my database from about 63 countries around the world. So what I can say is, in the United States, I think what we have to do is dive into the business model. And I can tell you that we've got already research proven, especially in the outpatient setting, research proven ways to eliminate burnout from the delivery of patient care in the outpatient setting, and drive all the indicators of performance that would also drive up remuneration to higher levels. And just if I can give a a shout out to Corey Lyon, Dr. Corey Lyon at the University of Colorado APEX program, APEX. He's got an upstaffing team-based care project in the back office. They give everybody 2.5 super MAs. It's an outpatient family practice clinic. And he wrapped his implementation in what I call a CFO metric set. So every number that he tracked would be of interest to a CFO, and they all turned strongly positive within 6 months of him actually developing this program. So I can tell you that if you talk about business success case studies, the kind of stuff you would put in the Harvard Business Review, the kind of stuff that moves a for-profit industry forward as wellness being a best practice, we're on the threshold of that. And in my practice, I'm seeing a lot more senior business leaders being willing to discuss with me what a wellness strategy would look like. And I'm trying to nail their foot to the floor to commit to a hard metric so we can put out case studies that show this makes good business sense too. Because think about it, it does. Quality, safety, turnover. Are you with me? Productivity. It all is higher when you take better care of your people. So there's a business case to be made here. And I think that may be the lever we're looking for.
That's very, very interesting. I'm glad to hear it because I wasn't really aware of all that and what you're doing and some other people are doing. The reason that I jumped in and wrote Man's Fourth Best Hospital was, as I said, I saw what modern medicine had become, which I really hadn't known and hadn't followed for a long time because I wasn't in practice anymore. And the thing that I saw, as I said, was the absolute, I'm just looking at one thing, let's say, the time in front of the screen. And the time in front of the screen is because they're for-profit organizations, and we're the ones who are trying to make them the profit. So the story of this book is that the man's fourth best hospital used to be man's first best hospital. And so they're going crazy, right? I won't say which it's modeled on because I'd have to kill all of you if I did, you know. But they need, so they're going down in the rankings. They need money and they need some prestige again. So they call via a contact the fat man, who has become very rich in Silicon Valley by he's in trials for a calcium pill that will restore memory to Gomers and others. Okay, so he then they say you can do anything you want. So what he wants to do, and this is why I took it on, I want to do this. What he wants to do, he said, I want to get up to create a public system, a public clinic, a public clinic, right up against these big buildings. And I want to show, quote, guess what? How to put the human back into medicine. So that was my job, right? I was sort of a model for the house way, 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 way back. It wasn't that fat, but, so I took that seriously. And in the middle of the book, the fat man says, he gives a lecture to his clinic guys, Piper Hooper, Eat My Dust Eddie. He takes a lot of those, but there's parity now with women, which I like. So there's many women doctors as men doctors in this clinic. And he's giving a lecture on the board, and he writes up the 6 rackets of American healthcare, follow the money, and then what to do about it. And it took me a long time, like, great, I love it. It took me a long time.
I'm ready.
Yeah. It took me months to figure out these 6 intertwined forces. It's unbelievable how complex, as you say, it's complex as hell. And so he puts them up on the board, and I had to really study. It took me 2 months to figure out what was going on. So he does that, and then he says, and what to do about it. So at the end of the book, he puts up the fat man's, model. And the one thing he does say, he puts in big letters at the beginning there, he says, we have to squeeze the money out of the machines. We have to squeeze the money out of the machines. And then he goes about saying how you can do that. And I think it kind of fits together. And as you mentioned, hinting at how do we get together, it's tough. It's tough. Doctors won't even share lunch, let alone, a union. But there are movements and, allying with the best unions there are in healthcare, the nurses. I mean, if you could ever get that together, that would be. But anyway, I haven't given up hope for doing that. But I'm glad to hear what you know probably more than me. I had hopes for this book that this might influence some people, actually.
Well, I think the idea of like physicians congregating into groups and advocating for each other, I mean, it's not a new idea. This is something that's been going on since any of the colleges of medicine have, formed from 100 years ago. Like, the college that I belong to, American College of Emergency Physicians, ABEM, and, there's AMA, AOA, there's so many, right? And I think that's what they've been hoping to do. And what I have been seeing just from like kind of a consumer standpoint, like, because I'm not involved with any of these organizations on a leadership level, I'm very sad to see like even the competition between them. So when I almost feel like physicians are set up for failure because it's almost like watching your parents fight, the whole time. And they're like, divorcing. And it's like, choose me, I'm the fun parent, and choose me, I'm the responsible parent. And you're like, well, I don't know who to go to, and I don't know where I should go. And that matters because then all of your money is going towards PACs to be like the nursing institute. Like the nursing fields, they don't have this much diversity like in their leadership. And that's why they're so strong. And I think that physicians, I mean, I don't work in any of these institutions. So if anybody's watching this, I hope that this brings maybe some clarity, even if they are working together, for us to understand that. Because if they are, we would never know. One of the things also I would want to mention is that I think that we've made everything so formal. And I think that formality brings that culture from medical school. And someone, I think it was Vecna that mentioned it in the comments of, we are so competitive. We've been taught, just like Dr. Drummond was saying, from medical school, like you have to be competitive. It's like the last man standing, last woman standing. It's even worse for women because when we were in medical school, our competition wasn't the men, it was the next woman. Because if we knew that the residency program we're applying to only took one woman resident a year, like the one I got into, you were constantly sizing yourself up against the women. So then all of a sudden you graduate, and you're like, well, now we need to coalesce and group and advocate for one another. And how do you do that? And then you look at these organizations and they make things so formal, right? And then you're already burnt out. You're burnt out from that formality, so it's like, well, what do I do now? And that's why groups like mine and like Donna's, they thrived because, in my group alone, I have 2 groups. And if you add up all the members together, it's over like 113,000 people. Now, if we can get those people to come together on the commonality of something outside of medicine, like mine is about being physicians and moms or being physicians that are fighting COVID. And if we can get, over 113,000 people together virtually that spread over 105 countries, what do we do? How do we mobilize those people? And I'll tell you, like, I don't know the exact answer, but I will tell you that, like Dr. Drummond said, it has been like herding cats. Everybody's in there and they want to make that space their priority, like for their goals. Like it doesn't matter what's good for the group. It matters what's good for them, And so it's more like, well, how do we teach these A-type personalities it's okay to take the back seat and let people, not like me, but people like the PACs and, the people who actually can make change, how do you elevate them? And going back to what you had said, Dr. Shem, I am very hopeful with the new administrative picks, for physicians. I mean, Dr. Vivek Murthy, he wrote a whole book on connection,
I know.
Called Together, right? And I was actually interviewed for that book. So I'm on like a couple of pages in that book, but it was really refreshing to even talk to him and to see what his vision is. Even before, and this was like 3 years ago, before I think that he even thought he would be Surgeon General again or even involved with anything. So I think I do have hope, but I think it takes the physicians that are listening to kind of reconnect with the organizations that already have the infrastructure to fight for us.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, I feel pretty strongly that the change doesn't have to come from top down. It doesn't have to come from legislation. You have way more control over the health and well-being of your personal care team moment to moment than you ever thought possible. And simple things like huddles, everybody knows they should be doing them. Nobody does them, right?
Mhm.
Simple things like taking a breath, let go of anything that doesn't need to be here right now every time you touch a doorknob. And I've worked for 10 years to give people the simplest things possible, but I'm telling you, a lot of times I see victim behavior, blame, justify, and complain, blame, justify, and complain, rail at the system and the man, but you go right, you vent just enough steam that you go right back to work and do the same stuff over again and actually pull Einstein's insanity trap lid down on your head. So we have a whole bunch more individual freedom and ability to change our reality than we give ourselves credit for.
That's right. That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
And I think also, while we wait for larger victories that you may be able to get from something like a physician union, I think there are also smaller victories that we can have within our smaller groups if we cooperate. And I actually have an example from my own physician practice where I'm part of a multi-specialty group, and had a new administrator that took over that, had plans on reorganizing the organization to, improve their bottom line. But in doing so was quite frankly demeaning and abusive to the physician staff. And people got together and basically held their feet to the fire and said, listen, if you don't get rid of this person, we're gone. And several physicians actually threatened to leave, to retire, to quit. And these were people with well-established practices for 30, 40 years. And, I was a little bit skeptical, but within 3 months, that person was gone. So just an example of when we stick together, even in, small victories like that, really can make a difference in our own individual environments.
Yeah, I put it very simply when I go out talking, which I don't go out talking anymore. When I get into the screen talking, if you were in a theater when we used to go to theaters, when you're in a theater and somebody falls down on stage, does the cry go out, is there an insurance executive in the house? No. I mean, it's so simple in a way. We're the doctors. We do the work even the threat, an organized threat in the distant future, say 6 months, a year, it's impossible for the country to deny something if we could do that, really. There are some glimmers. I mean, I agree it has to start with everybody small, but there is going to be a discussion of public option with Obamacare under the Biden administration. That's not a bad thing. That's not a bad thing. I mean, for my mind, in terms of doctor stress, I'm not sure about the numbers, but the VA, I think, before they got this, ultra shitty, new kind of computer, had a higher, satisfaction with their work than anyone else because they weren't in the war across the screen with the insurance person, right? They didn't have that, an appendectomy in one part of the country was the same as an appendectomy in another part of the country, more or less. So, I mean, there's a way that needs us to pay attention to, because if we cut our time in front of the screens by, what would you say, to 30% instead of 60% or 70%, that would matter a lot. It really would. Let there be supplemental insurance. We just do the data, send it. If there's private insurance, supplemental insurance, we send the data to the insurance company and say, you want to bill more? Go ahead, do it on our screens, not on on your screens, not on my screens. I mean, that's overstating it, but that's the kind of, we have to sort of think a little broader about this. I think it might all happen, actually. But, I'm a 60s guy, so I stopped the Vietnam War and put the civil rights laws on the books. That's pretty good.
Right on.
Yeah. Are you of that generation too?
No, I was born in 58, so I must be a 70s guy.
Well, the Vietnam War didn't end till the 70s, you know. Yeah. This is a very good conversation, you know. So dive in, you know.
Well, I would say one of the interesting data points is I'm working with an organization right now that has 170 employed providers. They have 200 people in the revenue cycle management department. These are the billing office, 170 docs, 200 people in the billing office. In Canada, you don't have a billing office.
Exactly.
You have
Imagine.
a direct transfer. Your bill goes in, and the next week the money comes into your account. Done.
My answer to that and to the whole community that's listening and to every doctor and nurse, et cetera, is duh.
Yeah, right. Single payer.
Single payer. It's, you know, I don't know if I'll live to see it. I think you might, though.
But there's an industry that supports 200 people in this organization and all of its money behind it that preserves that status quo. So it's going to be one heck of a fight.
Oh.
But I do like this idea, Dr. Shem. I mean, you mentioned this a couple of minutes ago, though. I think as far as like, you know, what is it going to take for physicians all together to come together to even threaten a strike or, you know, whatnot. And it's funny because when I go back to my medical school teachings, and I don't remember exactly the context of it, but I was always told, and I know this is not exactly true, but I was always told, like, you can't strike. Like, it's actually like, it's unlawful for you to do it. Whether it's unlawful or unethical, that's a whole different discussion. But I think one of the opportunities that we have here is, you know, we are coming off of a pandemic, and historically pandemics do give birth to a lot of rights. You know, the 1918 pandemic gave birth to a lot of women's rights afterwards. And there was a lot of reasons why, because of the overlap of, you know, the World War that was happening. But I almost, you know, it's funny during this pandemic, because I do work with, you know, large tech companies of, you know, kind of providing good information to patients. And I'm working in a consultant role. You know, we've been looking at that. And one of the things I've been looking at, and I know I'm emergency medicine. So I've been kind of one foot into emergency medicine, like making sure that, you know, my colleagues are taken care of, that we have like the up-to-date like PPE and, you know, protocols and whatnot. But the other part has been like, where are the opportunities? Like, if I don't look for the opportunities of what can happen, what is the COVID story for medicine? Did we just survive and get people through it, or did we change how healthcare is in the future? I think there's so many opportunities, and I almost am excited at the idea, if there is an organized fashion of us demanding what we want, especially from the new administration, who seems to be a little bit more interested in hearing what we have to say. I'm not saying that means that they'll do it, but I'm almost wondering, you know, how do we organize physicians? Because there's a lot of spaces that we already are organized. You know, like, you know, my space, I just mentioned 100,000 people, and I'm more than willing to work with agencies that are larger with infrastructure that have access to, you know, the White House and to legislation to make these changes. But it's more like, well, who starts those conversations? And then why do those conversations stop? Is it because these organizations are scared of some kind of backlash or lawsuits, or I don't even understand it to that extent to even to know, you know? So in your experience, Dr. Shem, that you've been in medicine, and Dr. Drummond, actually, I think all of you have been in medicine longer than me. I've only been out of residency for 10 years. I mean, what is your experience in why these conversations stop, even if there is momentum like there is now?
Well, you know, this is the way change comes. You know, I mean, I've been through big changes. This is how it changes. This is what's called hope. You know, of course, it doesn't seem like we could ever do anything, but you know, this is right now. It's been so horrible for 4 years, and now we have some hope, I think, and that this generates enough resistance to try to do something together, and that's a very difficult thing to do. But as I said in an op-ed I wrote years ago, you would just have to threaten a strike, and as it got close, you know, you get people to sign up. Nothing they have to do. You get to 200,000 signatures, and people start to take it seriously. The other thing that I get from younger people when I talk about this, in fact, I guess that's all of the people I talk about this now, but they say, oh, but no, doctors can't strike.
Mm-hmm.
And I say,
That's what we're told.
and I say, that's terrific, because that will get a lot of attention as the issue. That's, it's sort of how you shift your zone of understanding. That's the best thing that could happen if somebody, we'll arrest a doctor. We don't do it often. They did it, I see Donna's here. They did it once in New York. The House staff did a walkout, left some people in there to take care of patients. They declared a strike. This was probably in the 70s. They settled in one day. Nobody said, "Oh, you can't strike." This is a great conversation. I wish we could go on. And my home email is Samuel Shem at Comcast.net if you want to get back to me. Great conversation.
Great. I'm going to step in because we're running out of time, but there actually isn't even a time for the Q&A session. So you all had such a great conversation. So I'm going to thank the panelists because I'm going to remove you off the virtual stage. So thank you, Doctors Drummond, Sabry, and Bryan. I appreciate you taking an hour out of your Sunday afternoon to enrich the conversation. So I'm going to remove you. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you, everybody. Really.
Absolutely.
It's working.
It is. This is how change begins, as these kinds of conversations and these organizing behind the scenes, etc. All right, Shem, are you ready for the man's fourth best transition?
I am.
Here we go.
I am. Yes.
Okay. Here it comes.
As I said earlier, I got really lucky. I was out of medicine for a long time, just being a writer, and then all of a sudden I got an invitation from NYU Medical School asking if I wanted to be a professor in medicine in medical humanities. And I said, "What do you want me to teach?" And they said, "We want you to teach the House of God." So I have been doing that for 5 years, and believe me, the students are terrific, and they're brave, and they're very conscious of what's ahead of them, and they don't like it too much because they can see what happens. And actually, medical students that they know have killed themselves. So this is really serious stuff for them. And I decided I had to do my best to describe what was going on here that was wrong, and how to write it, and how to cure it, how to heal it, how to get us doctors, nurses, and others some way of treating patients and treating ourselves as we most want. And as you heard earlier, the narrator, the same as House of God, says at the beginning, I am writing this book because it was a time when medicine could go one of two ways, either more toward humane or toward money and screens, which means money. And so that's the book I wrote. And it's in some ways a primer for how we can understand this and what we can do about it. I took that very seriously, as I took the House of God under that difficulty. So I'm just going to do something very simple and short, since this is the last of this first series that we're doing. As you know, in Man's Fourth Best Hospital, I wrote the 13 laws of the House of God, and they became incredibly popular. They're all over the world. They're still there. I saw somebody sent me something. They have a T-shirt with the 10 that you can buy from somebody who has the 12 laws of the House of God. So I figured, okay, at the end, I will do the same thing with Man's Fourth Best Hospital. So you haven't read the book, probably. I hope you go and read it and tell your friends. But here are the 10 laws of Man's Fourth Best Hospital. Number 1, learn your trade in the world. 2, isolation is deadly, connection heals. 3, connection comes first. Elaborate on that a little, in that if you connect with a person, a new patient, and if you connect with a new patient, you'll hear everything. If you don't connect, you won't hear anything, right? Use the we. Use the we when you talk to a patient. How about if we do this? And what the patient will say will come back with, well, I think we should do. So you plant the we, you concretize it between you that says there's a relationship here, right? 5, it's not just what we do, it's what we do next. In trying to connect, nobody gets it right. We're always screwing it up, right? Think of your beloved ones, even with them. So the thing that makes it, whether it's a doctor's office or in your home situation, the people who survive and get better, et cetera, are who move through the disconnect to a better connection, move through a disconnect to a better, even saying we are in a disconnect to your patient is a connecting thing to say. It's not that we do what we think we can get, it's what we dare to do together. Meaning, together, we don't have to limit what we're asking for. You ask for a lot, you get a little maybe. Number 7, without healthcare workers, there's no healthcare. Number 8, squeeze the money out of the machines. That's the basic thing that the fat man says. And then he goes into it in very brilliant fat man ways. So you learn a lot about what the possibilities are in his mind and mine. And 9, put the human back in medicine. Put the human back in medicine. However you can think to do that. It may mean taking a deep breath before you go into the patient's room, right? Etc. And number 10, this is the most important thing. I said it at the beginning, I'll say it at the end. Stick together no matter what. Thank you so much.
That was great, Shem. I'm going to, first of all, thank you very much for doing this season with me. It was fabulous. I had such a great time. First of all, getting to know you even before the season, but just chatting with you regularly on the phone has been incredibly enriching. So thank you so much. I think that everything that you have done will contribute, I hope, to changing the face of medicine. So I look forward to it. And I'm actually going to leave Shem on the screen for a few seconds just to make the announcement that we are talking about the possibility of a season 2. And what's exciting is we're going to change things up. And so Shem and I are trying to creatively think outside of the box on just what we can create for you in a season 2 of bringing Shem into our audience and what will be exciting. So if you have any ideas or want to see, tell us, Shem.
Yeah, we're just starting to shape this on the basis of our first 6. So, got ideas?
Absolutely. If anybody has ideas out there or you know what you want to hear Shem do, we are thinking about how to make it a little bit different and a little bit just as exciting. So that's going to be fabulous.
And
Shem, again.
Thank you for putting this together. It's a hell of a lot of work, and I think your family is still intact. And it's a little love fest here. We both admire.
Thank you. We do. We do.
Great we.
Yeah, the connection is there. Like you said, it's a mutual connection. And so I feel, earlier, it's so funny. I was sitting and reading and I was getting a little emotional thinking about you, just thinking that this is the end. But it's the end of season 1. And I think we're going to stay in touch. So I thank you for touching my life. And I hope that you've touched others, not only with House of God, because I know that touched so many people, but hopefully with this series and with starting these discussions. So thank you, Shem. And thank you to everyone who's watching us. This concludes our episodes. We will not have any of the videos that close us up every week, but hopefully we will have something new and exciting coming in, maybe a few weeks or a few months down the line. All right. So goodbye, everybody. Have a great rest of your Sunday and happy holidays.